ശ്രുതിസ്മൃതിപുരാണാനാമാലയം കരുണാലയം നമാമി ഭഗവത്പാദശങ്കരം ലോകശങ്കരം. വിശ്വം ദർപ്പണദൃശ്യമാനനഗരീതുല്യം നിജാന്തർഗതം പശ്യന്നാത്മനി മായയാ ബഹിരിവോദ്ഭൂതം യഥാ നിദ്രയാ. യസ് സാക്ഷാത് കുരുതേ പ്രബോധസമയേ സ്വാത്മാനമേവാദ്വയം തസ്മൈ ശ്രീഗുരുമൂർത്തയേ നമ ഇദം ശ്രീദക്ഷിണാമൂർത്തയേ. Most Venerable His Holiness Swami Vasudevananda Brahmananda Bhudi of Tekke Madham, Shankara Madham, most respected His Holiness Swami Achyutananda Bharati of Nadivil Shankara Madham, I do my pranams and namaskarams to you both, because you too are the representatives of Shankaracharya, the great tradition in Trichy. Most respected Professor Deepti Tripathi ji, the former director of National Mission of Manuscripts, Government of India, and professor and head of the Department of Sanskrit in Delhi University, a veteran scholar known throughout the globe, a great orator, a great scholar in Sanskrit, Advocate Padur Parameswaran, the president of Brahmaswam Madham, under whose leadership all the three madhams jointly could organize a great academic event named Shankara Samaroha. Sri Vadakumbadu Narayanan, my friend, and a great man of leadership, a very good administrator. He is the chairman of Vedic Research Center in Trichur. Dr. Maras Ravindran Nambudiri and other speakers, those who give felicitation in this inaugural session. Dr. Aryambika, who presented Shankara Stotra in a very beautiful way, very attractive way, and given a very auspicious beginning to this great academic program. Dr. Aryambika, Dr. Padur Damodaran, the general convener of this entire program, the inmates of Brahmaswam Madham, the administrative and academic staff, including Ubadhyaya Sangha of all the three madhams in Trichur, all the members of the executive body of VRC and madhams, I bow before you on this auspicious occasion of Sreesankara Jayanti, Jagadguru Sreesankara Jayanti. It is a great privilege to give a great lecture in the name of a great Acharya, Jagadguru Shankara, and that too organized jointly by all the three Shankara Madhams in Trichur. Hence, it is very auspicious and very significant. Normally, every year, the Shankara Jayanti celebrations are organized separately. This year, all the three madhams, they joined their hands and organized this function in a very befitting manner. Actually, they were planning to organize it for a week, just like Kalidasa Samaroha in North. They planned to do the Shankara Samaroha in Trachur, which will comprise for 1 week. But due to the serious pandemic situation prevailing around, that was not advisable. So for the time being, for this year, it will be conducted only for one day. But next year onwards, it will, with all its pomp and show, with all its seriousness, academic seriousness, it will be organized. That what all the three madhams have taken decision. Now coming to my subject, I have to speak on Shankara, how Shankara has made a fusion of monism and devotion, the Advaita philosophy and the Bhakti. Bhakti belongs to Dvaita philosophy. As an Advaitin, how he used very brilliantly the devotion as a very strong step and a very strong upaya for attaining the final emancipation. So that is my paper, the subject of my paper, Monism and Devotion. That is Shankara's different standpoints. Age cannot wither, nor custom stale the infinite variety of the genius called Shankara. Shankara is the epitome of India. Even after more than thousands of years, the manifold effects of his gigantic impact in the form of commentaries, prakarana granthas, and sweet devotional hymns are palpable everywhere. He lived for only 32 years, but he continues scoring centuries in the world of thought, life, and light. Shankara's life is a shining example of Indian philosophy and spirituality lived and applied to daily life. He is the example of religion in action. No intellectual genius before or after Shankara had his scholarship and learning. As a saint and a yogi, he was one of the greatest the world has ever produced. As a preacher, he was outstanding, most outstanding. As an intellectual, he was without an equal. As a commentator, he was most authentic and prolific. Even the great commentator Madhusudana Saraswati, he says that even though I am a commentator, Shankara also a commentator, but when we weigh, it is just like gunja you place in one place and the what we call the gold in the other. Normally, നമ്മൾ സ്വർണം തൂക്കാനായിട്ട് പണ്ട് കാലത്ത് കുന്നിക്കുരുവാണ് വയ്ക്കുക. ഒരു തട്ടിൽ കുന്നിക്കുരു, മറ്റേ തട്ടിൽ സ്വർണം. പക്ഷേ സ്വർണത്തിൻ്റെ വില എത്ര വലുതാണ്. സ്വർണത്തെ തൂക്കാൻ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന കുന്നിക്കുരുവിൻ്റെ ഈക്വൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ളതോ വെയിറ്റ് ഉള്ളതോ അതിന് വെയിറ്റേ ഉള്ളൂ, പക്ഷേ അതിന് വാല്യൂ ഇല്ല. Madhusudana Saraswati says that even though we are equal, we both are bhashyacaras, but vyakhyaadritvebi me nasti bhashyakarena tulyata gunjaya kinnu hemnaiga tularopepi tulyata. That what Madhusudana Saraswati asks. As an organizer, reformer, and a man of action, he was unparalleled. As a singer, he was the bard unsurpassed. As a creative writer, he is in the foremost of all poets in creative writing. How beautifully he blend the an attractive blending we come across in his poetry. Nowhere in the world, among poets or philosophers, if you go, how he very boldly made philosophy as a strong base for poetry, and philosophy became very attractive and with full of fragrance because of poetry. So they are being complemented. So there are several examples for that. When you take Saundara Lahari, immediately a poem, a sloka comes in my mind. Kavindranam chedak kamalavana balataparuchim bhajande santah kadijadarunameva bhavadim virinji preyasyaha tarunatara singara lahari gabhirabhiruvakbhi satadamyo mam ranjanamami. Like that, so many stotras he have composed. If we are to understand this great multidimensional ascetic and appreciate his works, we have to capture an understanding of the climate of thought in which he lived and functioned. At the time, there were various conflicting systems of thought in India, and condition that prevailed can be best characterized as nebulous. Socially, philosophically, as well as religiously, there was no central rallying point from which men could view the entire panorama of Indian thought. The several systems of thought were narrow and self-sufficient and had nothing to do with the another. Shankara makes a direct reference to the prevalent sects of in his time in Dashashloki. Na Sankhya, na Shaivam, na Tatpancharatram, na Jainam, na Mimamsagader matam va. Visishtanubhutya, Visuddhatmagatvat, Tadego Vasishta Shiva Kevaloham. Na Jainam tadanyam dudiyam kutasyat, na va kevalatvam, na cha kevalatvam, na shunyam, na cha shunyam, advaitagatvat, katham sarva vedanta siddham brevimi. It was at such a time that the mastermind Shankara set to work to produce unity in the field of religion, culture, and philosophy. We find clearly from a study of Shankara's works that his purpose was to reduce to unity and harmony under the hegemony of Vedanta, the multiplicity of conflicting thought systems without destroying the integrity of the prevalent faiths. He could have brought everything to a dull level of uniformity, but he did not do that, for it militated against his idea of the richness of diversity in the world of faith, Bahuswarata, in the field of faith. Unity in diversity was for him was his aim and not uniformity. Actually, unity in diversity was his aim, not uniformity. The difference between unity and uniformity. Diversity connotes richness, but diversity, when it destroys the central unifying chord, becomes chaotic and an enemy of all progress and well-being of a community. Shankara tries to introduce the meditating element among and he found it in the great philosophy of Vedanta, which proclaimed as ultimate reality. A principle that is personal as well as impersonal, immanent as well as transcendent. As such, he fully deserved the title Shanmata Sthapaka. In his missionary work, Shankara, of propagating the great philosophical truths of the Upanishads, Acharya Shankara had a variety of efficient weapons in his resourceful armory. He appealed to the intellect through his great commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Upanishads, heavily laden with irresistible arguments in vigorous Sanskrit prose, and the Prakarana Granthas explaining the Vedantic truths in a short form. To appeal to the heart of the ordinary people, he poured out sweet devotional songs in which his pen danced itself to the rhythm of his heart and to the swing of his thoughts. There are several examples for that. Previously, I have quoted one from Saundara Lahari. Konal Kanchi Dama Karikala Bhakumbhastananada Parikshina Madhye Parinata Sharat Chandra Vadana Dhanurbanan Pasam Srinimabidadhana Karatalehi Purastadastamna Puramadhiduraho Purushigam. Like that, several. I just quoted one verse. There are several examples for that. All the slokas are examples for this. The great Acharya understood the limitations of common man, and hence he considers that a gradual and everlasting progress through bhakti or devotion is more congenial and practicable and easier for accomplishment to the average person. Further, there is nothing wrong with the fundamental and basic structure of bhakti as such. Why? What is wrong is what is wrong with the system in the bhakti is that only the gaudy and flimsy superstructure of ritualism in bhakti and showiness which is being erected on the basic structure. In the basic structure of bhakti, these unwanted things have come up through ages. The Acharya Shankara's attempt is therefore directed towards the demolition of the said structures. What I have told about the Gaudian flimsy superstructures of ritualism. So all the ritualism he thrown away. The Acharya's attempt is therefore directed towards the demolition of the false and superficial superstructures and the building up of the proper and well-constructed mansion of bhakti, so that bhakti will endure and withstand the ravages of time and slaughter of irreligion on one hand and superstition on the other. But even for bhakti, a canon is absolutely necessary as a guard against degeneracy. Hence, Shankara directed his attention to the composition of several devotional stotras on the deities which were commonly worshipped by ordinary people. He was not an exclusive Shaivite or Vaishnavite or Shakta, and yet when he praised Shiva, Vishnu or Durga or anyone in his hymns, he stood out to be the best among Shaivites, best among Vaishnavites, and the best among Shaktas, thus setting a model for the respective groups for the correct method of worship. He proved himself to be a master in all fields of knowledge and practice, whether Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shakti cult, Tantra, Mantra, and Yoga, all these. The hymns were inspired, the hymns were inspired poetical outpouring of Shankara and not mere literary versifications. Not simply composing a sloka with 4 lines, somewhere or other with hard work. Shankara, for him, the kavita is dancing in his hands. It is always with full vigor and pleasure, with all bliss. It incarnates in his pen. Such a devotional piece. So the hymns were inspired poetical outpouring of Shankara. Inspired poetical outpouring, that is the word I have used. That is his kavita, and not merely literary composition. Picking up some words from here and there and put it, and somewhere or other you make a what we call, in Malayalam we say Nalkali. So 4 padas are there, and like that. It's not like that. Such a devotional pieces have sprung from him while visiting hallowed places of worship and places where God's presence could be felt very strongly. His stotras are composed in such hallowed places. Under the heat of his fervent ideals, the great Sanskrit language became almost a plastic. He could mold it into any shape and into any form. Sanskrit language is a tough language, the great language. It was just like a plastic in his hand. He could model it in any way. He can mold it in any shape, any form. See how beautifully he writes. Arudha praudhavega pravijita pavanam. Arudha praudhavega pravijita pavanam tungatungam durangam. Chelam neelam vasana karatala vilasatkanda kodanda danda. Ragadveshadi nanavidha mrigapatali bhitikrit bhutabharta kurvanna khedalilam parilasadumanakkanane mamakine. Such a very highly stylized and cultured and highly devotional, spiritual, full of nectar of the great bhakti rasa in all this, and pregnant with the philosophy. So how his poetry works? The variety in literary structure varies from small compositions, starting from one shloka, Ekashloki, then Chadushloki, Panchakam, Dashakam, Shatakam, like that. It goes. Laharis, Bhujangas, like that. And compositions of 5 verses called Pancharatnams and Panchakas, 6 verses, 8 verses called Ashtakas, and hymns set in Bhujanga Prayatam meter called Bhujangas, and Lahari and Lahari, Shumanand Lahari, Saundar Lahari, like that. Then Laharis, and also Vedantic prayers for meditation, not purely bhakti. It is bhakti, but at the same time it can be used for meditation. Philosophical, a step of philosophy, a step for attaining the final realization. So such prakaranas are there. Vedantic prayers for meditation in one shloka, sometimes 5 shlokas, 10 shlokas, and so on. But the underlying strand running in all these hymns, whether it is 1 shloka, 5 shloka, or 10 shloka, or 100 shloka, whatever it may be, the underlying strand running in all these hymns is the Vedanta. Vedanta philosophy is fully put in all these poems. We find a unique wedding of poetry and philosophy here in all his verses, in all his stotrams. The beginning verse in Govindashtakam is a best example for it. Satyam Jnanamanandam Nityam, such verses, fully, he explains, he is depicting Krishna or Vishnu, but he says the qualifying adjuncts are there: Satyam, Jnanam, Anandam. He qualified Vishnu with all these things. These are the epithets of or qualifying agents of Brahman. So he never finds a difference between bhakti and this Atmajnana. So it is two sides of the same coin for him. The hymns of Shankara are bouquets of fresh blooms. A bouquet of fresh blooms is always beautiful and rewarding, even to look at from a distance. Similarly, even to hear these stanzas chanted is thrilling enough. And for the industrious bees that are capable of courting the flowers and entering deeper into them, there is always the sweeter honey as a special and extra reward. So too, to the students who are capable of entering beneath the superficial joys of the metrical rhythms and thus dwelling deeper into the philosophical implications suggested in the hymns, there is a real nectar, a consoling philosophy, a satisfying view of life. നല്ല ആകർഷകമായിട്ടുള്ള നല്ല മനോഹരമായിട്ടുള്ള പൂവ് നമ്മൾ കാണുമ്പോൾ ആ പൂവിൻ്റെ അടുത്തേക്ക് എത്താൻ നമുക്ക് ആഗ്രഹം ഉണ്ടാവും. ആ പൂവിൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് എത്തുമ്പോൾ അതിന് നല്ല സുഗന്ധം ഉണ്ടാകുമ്പോൾ ആ സുഗന്ധം കൊണ്ട് ആ പുഷ്പത്തിലേക്ക് ആകർഷിക്കപ്പെടുകയും ആ പുഷ്പത്തിൽ എത്തിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ പിന്നെ ആ പുഷ്പത്തിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ പണിയെടുത്ത് അതിലേക്ക് ഇറങ്ങണം. വണ്ടുകൾ അതിൽ വളരെ താഴ്ന്ന് ഇറങ്ങിയിട്ടാണ് പണിപ്പെട്ടിട്ടാണ്. അങ്ങനെ കുറേ അധ്വാനിക്കണം. അധ്വാനിക്കുമ്പോഴാണ് അതിൽ നിന്ന് വലിയ അർത്ഥങ്ങളുടെ, മധുരമായ അർത്ഥങ്ങളുടെ ഒരു പരമ്പര തന്നെ ഉണ്ടാവും. മധുരമായ തേൻ, ഹണി, ഇതിൽ നിന്ന് പുഷ്പങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് മധു കിട്ടുന്നത് പോലെ ഈ ശ്ലോകങ്ങളും മനോഹരമായ ശബ്ദവിന്യാസം കൊണ്ടും അർത്ഥവിന്യാസം കൊണ്ടും ബാഹ്യമായ സൗന്ദര്യം കൊണ്ട് ശങ്കര കവിതകൾ ആകർഷിക്കപ്പെടുകയും പുഷ്പങ്ങളെപ്പോലെ ആകർഷിക്കപ്പെട്ട് ഭക്തൻ അവിടെ എത്തുമ്പോൾ ആ കവിത വായിച്ച് അർത്ഥം മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ, അതിനുള്ള ക്ലേശം ഉണ്ടായി തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ മനോഹരമായ അർത്ഥത്തിൻ്റെ തലം ഉണ്ടാവുന്നു എന്ന് മാത്രമല്ല, ദർ ഈസ് എ റിയൽ നെക്ടാർ, എ കൺസോളിംഗ് ഫിലോസഫി and a satisfying view of life. This is something very unique you cannot find in other stotras, other devotional poems written by other great poets. Many of his hymns are considered to be efficacious in securing secular benefits. They are expressed at the last stanza of each hymn. But to Shankara, prayer was not a beggary. യാചനമല്ല. ഭഗവാനോട് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുന്നത് ഒരു യാചനയല്ല, മറ്റേ ഭിക്ഷയാചിക്കലല്ല. ഹിസ് ഹിംസ് ഇൻവാരിയബിളി കൺസിസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ദ പ്രയർ ടു ഗ്രാൻഡ് വൺ ദ ട്രൂ ലൈറ്റ് ഓഫ് നോളജ് ആൻഡ് ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേഷൻ, വിവേക, ആൻഡ് ടു സേവ് വൺ ഫ്രം ദ വീൽ ഓഫ് ബർത്ത് ആൻഡ് ഡെത്ത്, and thus setting the ideal to be pursued by the students. These hymns make a refreshing departure from the arid path of the knowledge. These hymns make a positive revolution in Indian thought and culture and inaugurated a refreshing renaissance for the ages. A glimpse into the hymns will reveal this fact. Not all the hymns properly attributed to Shankara, even though we have more than 400 stotras are in the name of Shankara, but I don't believe that all these stotras are written by Shankara, because there may be several other Shankaracharyas in that line, starting from Shankara, in all the four madhams. They are equally scholars and very good philosophers and very good poets. So they also would have written something. They are also known after Shankara. But certainly, Saundarlahari, Shivanandalahari, Dakshinamurti Stotra, like that, several stotras, surely, without any doubt, researchers have found that they are from the pen of Shankara. So, however, can be accepted as his poems, But the composition like Ganesha Panchaka, Mohamudgara, Bhajagovindam like that, Ananda Lahari, Govindashtakam, Dakshinamurti Stotra, Shivananda Lahari, Ekashloki, Manisha Panchakam, etc. All these the scholars believe, both traditional and modern scholars, those who have sufficient research in their disposal, done sufficient research in their disposal, they also accept these such verses, stotras are written by Shankara only. They seem to be from his mastermind, all these poems. Shankara. As in his philosophical thought, so in his hymns, Shankara manages brilliantly to accept the personal deity of popular theism without surrendering his monism. So all local deities are accepted for his stotras. But whenever he composes poems on or stotras on such deities, he never compromises his monism, his theory of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta, strictly speaking, at the final stage of emancipation, in the final stage of realization, the moksha, there is no God. But the God, the concept of God has been very attractively made useful as a strong ladder for a real jitnyasu to reach the final destination, that is moksha. So that is the cleverness of Shankara, the brilliance of Shankara. So he never surrendered his monism. It doesn't mean that when he composed stotras, he is a strong Dvaiti. There is a saying, Kumar Labata in one place he says, Asatye Vartmani Sthitva Tata Satyam Samihate. So, only standing in Asatya, you can, if you are searching Satya, then certainly you are in Asatya. You are standing in Asatya. You are now staying in Asatya. That's why you are searching for Satya. So, if you want to moksha, that means certainly you are not in moksha now. So, not in that stage. So, you are in Dvaita. You are in Dvaita now, in that, but that is not the final one. From Dvaita, you march towards Advaita. This is the crux of Shankara Vedanta. In the Mohamudgara, he says, Shankara says, Toyi mayi cha anyatrai go Vishnu, vyartham gupyasi maya sahishnu, sarvasminnapi pasyatmanam, sarvatrol srija bhedajnanam. Mohamudgara, Shloka 24. Brahman is the ultimate reality. World we experience is unreal. Jiva and Brahman are identically one and the same. Or bhakti, devotion, is generated from karma. Devotion gives birth to jnanam, and that is knowledge. And that knowledge leads to liberation. This is the crux of Vedanta. So, Shankara says in Viveka Chudamani, the famous verse, Karmana jayate bhakrihi, bhakriyat jnanam prajayate, jnanat sanjayate mokshaha, iti vedartha nishayaha. Until realization is attained, God remains the goal for the empirical self's spiritual journey. An empirical self, Jivatma, for his spiritual journey, until realization is attained, God remains the goal. Up to that time, God is the final. For him, the lakshya, the destination. But once they reach God really, when they, through niskama karma, when they reach with all virtues, all these daivi gunas, practicing all daivi gunas, a real bhakta, while he reaches surrendering to God permanently, without any condition, unconditionally, do it, then up to that time, God is the what we call goal for him. But once he reaches that stage, his goal changes. His goal becomes the final emancipation, that is the Brahma Sakshatkara. He says in the Shivananda Lahari, Ankolam Nijabija Sandadirayaskandobalam balam Sujika Sadhvi Naija Vibhum Latakshidiruham Sindhu Saridvallabham Prapnodi Hayatha Datha Pashupade Padaravindadvayam Chedo Vrittirupetyatishtadi Sada Sa Bhakti Rityuchyate. So he made it very clear what is bhakti. This is in Shivananda Lahari, Shloka 61. The Vishnu Bhujanga Prayada Stotram states without a beautiful verse, fully poetical with Vedantic ideal along with bhakti. Chidamsham vibhum nirmalam nirvikalpam niriham niragaram omkaragamyam Gunaditam avyakrame kanturiyam param brahmayam veda tasmai namaste. Chidamsham vibhum nirmalam nirvikalpam niriham niragaram omkaragamyam Gunaditam avyakrame kanturiyam yam param brahma yam veda param brahmayam veda tasmai namaste. Bhujanga Prayada, the shloka. So here, see how he uses all the epithets strictly which are being accepted by the Advaitins in their metaphysical discussion on self, Atma, that Paramatma. But the worship is internal for him. For him, the worship is not something an outside practice. It is not something showy. He says that Gabhire Kasare Visadi Vijane Ghore Vipine Vishoge Shaileva Brahmadi Kusumartham Jadamati Samarpegam Chera Sarasijamu Umanadha Bhavade Sukhena Vasthadum Janaihana Janami Kimaho. Yet in another place, Shankara in Kashi Panchaka. Kashi Panchaka is one of a beautiful stotras among his stotras. He asked the real devotee, why you go outside to all tirthas? All tirthas are inside your body. You consider your body itself as tirtha. He says that, in the sloka I quote, Kashi Kshetram Shariram Tribhuvana Janani Vyapini Jnana Ganga Bhakri Shraddha Gayeyam Nija Guru Charana Dhyana Yoga Prayaga Vishvesoyam Turiya Sakala Jana Manasakshi Bhutondaralma Dehe Sarvam Madiye Yedivasadi Punastirthamanyat Kimasti Anya Tirtha Kimasti. All tirthas are in my body. Then why you go outside for a tirtha? So, such beautifully he has very convincingly, he gives all the what we call, he explains his points very befittingly, very convincingly, with all propriety, and which is akin to the main sentiment of stotra, that is bhakti. His monism thus sequered. Shankara can become almost a dualist in fervor. In fervor, he is just like a dualist, but his monism thus sequered. So his monism is fully packed and protected without any disturbance from outside world with bhakti. So bhakti he uses to cover as we keep a nectar, amrita in a kumbha. He keeps everything, this valuable amrita, the Advaita Bodha, Advaita Jnana, in the stotras, those are written with full of devotion. There is several examples can be given for that. hundreds of verses are composed by Shankara. Whenever he reached any hallowed places in this Bharatavarsha, he padacharena gatva, he went on foot and going everywhere. He went to the local temples of those places and he praised those deities. And see, Mudagarattamodagam sada vimukti sadhagam kaladharavatamsagam vikasirogarekshagam anayaikanayakam vinashite bharekshagam natashubhashunashagam namamitam vinayakam. Ganesha Panchaka sloka. Like that, so many slokas are there, so many things he has, even so many cultural values he has what we call packed fully and put in every word, not even every letter in the stotra. He packed this culture and this Advaita culture, and that has been given as a pills, as small pills for the bhakta to take. When we speak about Shivananda Lahari and Saundara Lahari and all those things, you see, Bhajagovinda, as you know, when you take the entire stotra, it is full of Vedanta. He explains in detail the vyarthata of the samsara, how it becomes futile. What is the use of running behind all these senses? Nalni Jaladalam Aditaralam Tadvajjividam Adishaya Chapalam Vidhi Vyadhya Abhimanagrastam Lokam Shokahatam Chasamastam. He goes like that in so many places. I have no time to quote several verses, but as an example, I have given one or two. Saundara Lahari, or the waves of bliss, is the culminating emblem of Shankara's integration of bhakti and jnana and efficacy of the mantras and the potency of yantras. It is an appeal in prayer to the mother goddess. The poetic qualities of the hymns are superb. Saundara Lahari, the word itself, it is that the name of the poem, the Namadheya, itself, it is a great a word of dhuni, full of suggestiveness. When you give commentary to each verse, then you will come to know how these verses are directly or indirectly gives the suggestion, the dhwani, and the beautiful dhwani to the title of this poem. See what a beautiful sloga he has given at the end of the poem. He says that Pradipajwalabhi Divasakara Nirajana Vidhi Sudhasutehe Chandropala Jalalavairarghirachana Sugiyerambhobhi Salilanidhi Sauhityakaranam Tudiyabhirvakbhi Tavajanani Vacham Studiriyam. See how beautifully he says. Devi is a Ratnagara of all words. She herself is in the form of words. So all the entire Shabda Suruva Makhilam Datte Sarvasya Vallabha Artha Suruva Makhilam Shabda Suruva Makhilam Datte Sarvasya Vallabha Artha Suruva Makhilam Datte Mugdhendu Shekharaha. This is Vayuvirana Vachanamasti. So when you take this verse, Shabda Suruva Makhilam Datte Sarvasya Vallabha, so all the words, that is the form of Devi. And he says that I take some words from you and give you as an offering. As we take water from the Nadi and give Tarpana, offering. So, whatever you have given a little, that I have taken and given to you with all devotion. Pradipajwalabhi Divasakara Nirajana Vidhi Sudhasutehe Chandropala Jalalavairarghirachana Sugiyerambhobhi Salilanidhi Sauhityakaranam Tudiyabhirvakbhi Tavajanani Vacham Studiriyam. The next landmark is seen in Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is addressed to God as Guru but whose grace one receives the teachings of non-duality, Advaita. In a short compass, it gives the quintessence of Advaita. The entire Dakshinamurti Stotram is a quintessence of Advaita Vedanta. So, it has been beautifully explained by the commentator thus. The Vedanta text may be compared to the milk ocean, reasoning to the Mandara hill, which was used as the churning rod. The process of inquiry to the churning and the Advaita to the ambrosia that emerged from the milk ocean. Collecting the ambrosia, Sankara has kept it in the present hymns, which seems as the vessel to preserve. As I told you earlier, when you put the nectar in a kumbha, collect the nectar and put in a kumbha, which seems as the vessel to preserve it for the distribution. Vishwam darpana drishyamana nagari tulyam nijandargatam pashyannatmani mayaya behiribodbhutam yatha nidraya yas sakshal kurute prabodha samaye swatmaname vadvayam tasmai Sri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Sri Dakshinamurtaye. Self-realized as Shankara was, did not forget the realized souls. Already realized souls, Jivan Muktas. They are already have the Brahma Sakshatkara. But he never forget them also. To those who had crossed over the barriers of isms, Shankara presented bouquets of meditation verses for them for daily meditation. Those who are already Tattvajnanis, for them also, they have to practice something daily. And that is Vedanta Stotras like Nirvana Shatakam, Upadesha Panchakam, Ekashlogi, Deshashlogi. Previously also I have mentioned that. Shatashlogi for regular recitation, reflection and meditation. Name Mrityu Sanga, Name Jati Bheda, Pita Naiva Me Chaiva Mata Na Janma, Na Bandhur Na Mitram, Gurur Naiva Shishya, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, 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 Shivoham. He repeats that. So this is for repetition and Pavana Punyena Dhyanaya. So വീണ്ടും ധ്യാനിക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി books of this kind in the hand, stotras of this type, this kind of stotras in the hands of a seeker who inquire, who are seeking Brahmajnana, these books are a passport for every entry into joyous realms of meditation and spiritual experience. Spiritual experience കിട്ടുന്നതിന് വളരെ ആനന്ദപൂർണമായ ധ്യാനത്തിലേക്ക് പ്രവേശിക്കാൻ, ആ വലിയ ലോകത്തിലേക്ക് പ്രവേശിക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു പാസ്പോർട്ടാണ് ശങ്കരാചാര്യരുടെ ഈ സ്തോത്രങ്ങളെല്ലാം. Shankara takes the process of Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. These are the three things for a Vedanta seeker has to do. The hymns easily provide that structure. He has shown through these hymns that arid path of knowledge is driven with the roses of definition. Shankara's magnanimous mind, laden with compassion for the ordinary folk, came down many a time to their level. He never sit on the tower. Shankara is an Advaitin and a great scholar, and he wrote for ordinary people. He wrote in plenty for the ordinary people. He was so kind, Karuna Maya. So he was very much worried about the ordinary folk, the layman. So several times he came down and guided them, the ordinary people, the Ajnanis, elevated them in their relief and practices so that they would also reach the supreme understanding of the one, the reality. The beauty of the teaching of Shankara's that through the Stotra literature lies in that they are applicable to all human beings, irrespective of religion, race, caste, or creed. For he wrote and taught for humanity as a whole, indeed as a real Jagat Guru. In Shankara, the literature gets a solid base. Actually, literature is very flexible. It is not rigid, but it got a rigid base, strong base, and authority through monism. അദ്വൈതം കൊണ്ട് കവിതയ്ക്ക് ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന് ഒരു ശക്തമായ ആധാരം, ഒരു ഉറച്ച ആധാരം, വേദാന്ത ശാസ്ത്രം പോലുള്ളൊരു ആധാരം അദ്ദേഹം ഉണ്ടാക്കി കവിതയ്ക്ക്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ വേദാന്ത ശാസ്ത്രം, കഠിനമായ വേദാന്ത ശാസ്ത്രം, അത് സാധാരണക്കാർക്ക് ഒരു ഫ്ലേവർ ഉള്ളതായിട്ട് തോന്നില്ല. അതിന് നല്ലൊരു ഫ്ലേവർ ഉണ്ടായി, അതിനോട് ഒരു അട്രാക്ഷൻ തോന്നാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് കവിത അതിനു വേണ്ടി ഉപയോഗിച്ചു. വേദാന്തത്തിന്, ശാസ്ത്രത്തിന് ഫ്ലേവർ ഉണ്ടായത്, എല്ലാവർക്കും ആക്സെപ്റ്റൻസ് ഉണ്ടായത്, എല്ലാവർക്കും അത് സ്വീകരിക്കണം എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നത് കവിതയുടെ ഈ ഫ്ലേവർ കൊണ്ടാണ്. അങ്ങനെ പരസ്പര സഹായമായിട്ട് കവിതയ്ക്ക് നല്ല ദൃഢമായ ഒരു തറ വേദാന്തം കൊണ്ട് സൃഷ്ടിക്കുകയും വേദാന്തത്തിനെ എല്ലാവർക്കും ആക്സെപ്റ്റബിൾ ആക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടി കവിതയുടെ മാധ്യമം ഉപയോഗിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. ഇതാണ് ശങ്കരൻ്റെ ഈ സ്റ്റാൻഡിനെ കുറിച്ചാണ് ഞാൻ സംസാരിക്കാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചത്. ഇതാണ് അതിൻ്റെ ഫൈനൽ. ഇത്രയും പറഞ്ഞു വന്നാൽ അതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് കവിതയിൽ എങ്ങനെയാണ് അദ്ദേഹം അദ്വൈത വേദാന്തത്തെ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്തത് എന്നുള്ളത്. In Shankara, the literature gets a solid base and authority through monism, and the monism in turn gets high acceptance and fragrance and charm through the unique flavor of poetry. With these remarks, I beg to remain. I thank the organizers, all the Swamijis of these Shankara Madhams, those who are blessing us to organize all these programs, and the authorities of all the Madhams. I thank all of them for giving this golden opportunity to deliver the first annual International Sreesankara lecture and on the day of Shankara Jayanti. And I am blessed with this activity, this deed, and I thank one and all those who heard me very patiently. Thank you.